it sets up Friday night. 7:10 p.m. on CBS in Washington, D.C. St. John's versus Duke. The one seed Duke Blue Devils, the one overall seed Blue Devils versus the five seed St. John's Red Storm. John Scheyer versus Rick Pitino. Uh, Cameron Boozer versus Zuby Ejiofor, what the matchups are going to be. So we have to call on an expert. We need to call on somebody that knows Duke, somebody that covers Duke. And well, didn't have to go really far because somebody that does so for On SI is Kevin Connelly. He's here today. Well, Kevin Connelly, hello. Welcome to the program once again. It's very nice of you to trade in your St. John's coverage for Duke coverage. I don't know how many people know this, but yes, Kevin does pull double duty. And now with Sports Illustrated is covering college basketball on a broad basis. But Kevin, it is the Sweet 16 in Washington. The 34-2 Duke Blue Devils, the winners of the ACC, are on a 13-game winning streak. They beat Siena 71-65, which raised a lot of eyebrows. And then all the comments from that game were Duke saying, hey, we expected them to roll over, and they certainly did not. And then they destroyed TCU 81-58 in the second round. For me, this game is kind of interesting because it's St. John's defense against the youth and talent of Duke. And all of this high profile roster up against St. John's. And to me, it's seniority versus youth. It is the high end guys of Isaiah Evans, Dame Sarr, and obviously the Boozers, which headlined by Cameron. What does St. John's and the St. John's fans need to look for in this game to start? And we'll break it down a little bit and preview what is about to happen on Friday.
Listen, they're really, really good. And they were labeled, I guess you could say, quote unquote, the most gettable one seed coming into the tournament solely based on health. I mean, Pat Gongba, their starting center, they called it foot soreness. People are assuming, was there a stress fracture? I mean, he was in a boot until right before tip-off against TCU. Right after the game, they put him right back into the boot. He played 13 minutes, and Duke outscored TCU by 20 in that game. And it was his first game since March 1st. And then Caleb Foster broke his foot in the regular season finale against North Carolina, had surgery the next day. I know John Scheyer said on Monday there's an outside chance he could play. I'd be stunned
I
if he
spoke to
played.
I spoke to a source today that is
Yeah.
pretty close to said no way.
No, I mean it's physically impossible because tip-off on Friday would be 19 days from when he had foot surgery. Like that's not going to happen. But there's no reason for them to rule him out right now, right? You leave that intrigue that hey, maybe this guy could come back and it gives St. John's the possibility of having to game plan for somebody else. But Cam Boozer is phenomenal. Gongba is really good, especially as a passer. The biggest thing I see as a matchup problem for St. John's is Isaiah Evans
Yeah.
because this guy can throw it in the rim as soon as he crosses half court. And he has no talk about St. John's players thinking about shooting three-pointers. This guy has no conscience. He's going to get the ball and he's going to put it up. He's developed his game where he can put the ball on the deck and get to the rim much better than he did last year. And that's the matchup where it's like, I don't know how St. John's is going to guard him because I was thinking, hey, if you want to throw a curveball at him, put Dylan Mitchell on Pat Gongba because Gongba, he's not really going to back you down as a low post scorer, but he's incredible rebounding the ball. He's incredible as a high-low passer and setting everybody up. So if you put a guy like Mitchell on him who would be giving up a couple of inches but has the athleticism to match him, like that could be a good matchup. Then you put Zuby on Cameron Boozer, which is like, my God, two of the 10 best players in college basketball. What a Friday night matchup that would be. And then it leaves Bryce Hopkins to guard Evans. And my only question with that would be, can he get around the court and follow him enough? Because he's the guy that has the size, because Evans
Right.
is about 6'8", and he's slender. They call that his nickname is Slim. They call him Slim for a reason. He's put some muscle on, but he's still a very slender player. But does Hopkins have the athleticism to match him and run around the court with him on the defensive side of the floor? The other thing, now that Caden Boozer has become this team's starting point guard, he can't shoot threes. Teams starting in the ACC tournament played off of him. They didn't guard him above the 3-point line because they wanted an extra body in the paint to try to deal with what Duke has down low. After a horrible game in the ACC tournament quarterfinals against Florida State, he figured out, hey, these guys aren't guarding me. Let me just get ahead of steam, come downhill, throw up a floater, or bank a shot in, and he's played great
Mhm.
basketball ever since. So I think that's where it starts for St. John's. They have to put pressure on Caden Boozer the entire length of the floor. Don't let him get comfortable and get into a rhythm. And then you can get into the details of the statistics that I think Duke is averaging close to two or three more turnovers per game since Foster has been out, and the shooting numbers and all that stuff. And a guy like Dame Sarr, who doesn't really give you that much offensively, but has potential to hit 3-pointers. He's played professional basketball with Barcelona in the Euro League. So this is a talented team. They're the number one overall seed for a reason. Would they be the number one overall seed had they not had injuries or whatnot? I don't know. Maybe Arizona would have leaped them, but listen, they're really good. They're a top seed for a reason, and Sweet 16 games aren't supposed to be easy. They're
Yeah,
supposed to be tough, and St. John's going to have their hand full.
I think that it's important that you mentioned the turnovers because since Caleb Foster went down, they are minus 18 in turnover differential in the last 5 games. So when you see St. John's defense, we just talked about St. John's and with playing this super physical and aggressive defense against Kansas. They forced Kansas to turn the ball over 16 times. It really dictated the game, and so you got a team in Duke that is young, has a potential turnover issue at the point guard position, and the other thing, Kevin, that you didn't really mention is they're not deep. They play about 7 guys. So, yes, you do want to shrink that lineup in the tournament, but could St. John's full court pressure potentially get them tired as well? Just something to keep an eye on. I mean, you've seen so many teams. Jay, you brought it up a few times about that inbound pressure and how much that has taken out of opponents. Jay, I know you watch a lot of college basketball. I mean, what do you think about Duke and this matchup with St. John's coming up on Friday?
Yeah, I texted a couple people yesterday, Kevin being one of them, and I said Isaiah Evans is the guy that
Mhm.
absolutely terrifies me. I think he's gotten even more confidence. He's been killing it from the ACC tournament. He had a great game against TCU. He's the guy that I really feel like I'm not sure where St. John's has the answer for. So yeah, I think the ball pressure on every inbounds and just in general can maybe muck things up. Duke has obviously looked human at times. You look at that first game against Siena, the first 32 or so minutes against TCU before Duke kind of really shut the water off on them. And obviously with the Caleb Foster, situation, St. John's has that to their advantage. I'm with Kevin that I don't think there's any way, 19 days off of a surgery that he'll ever get the medical clearance to play in this game. But Cam Boozer, of course, gets all the notoriety and the attention, and we have a superstar matchup with him and Zuby. But Isaiah Evans can really present some problems, and I'm not personally, I'm not sure if I would put Bryce on him. I understand Kevin's thought there, but I would maybe put probably start with Mitchell on there, but maybe they start with Bryce on there because maybe if they start doing switches, you could switch Mitchell back onto him. So I'm really curious to see how they match up, and I'm really curious to see like how Kansas just let St. John shoot. Like Rick said, they're letting us shoot and they're doing it for a reason because we're not making them pay for it. Obviously, they kind of kept that same game plan going, and St. John's continued to make it rain all game. Curious to see, and I'm going to ask you, Kevin, do you think Duke is going to kind of come with that same defensive philosophy and just let St. John's chuck?
I don't because they put so much pressure on the ball themselves.
Yeah.
Like they get up and guard you. Like they're not somebody that says, "Hey, we're just going to let you shoot because we're concerned about Zuby Ejiofor down low getting his," because they have confidence that Gongba and Boozer will be able to handle him. So they love to put pressure on the ball and they want to force turnovers to you. But the thing I'll add to that is, all right, Dylan Darling's the point guard. St. John's doesn't have a legitimate point guard. Like Dylan Mitchell will bring the ball up the floor. Bryce Hopkins will bring the ball up the floor. So if they're matched up with a guy like Boozer or Gongba or Evans, I don't necessarily see the same pressure being put on the ball against those guys than it would, say, Caden Boozer against the Dylan Darling or Dame Sarr against a guy like Ian Jackson. So I think that's where St. John's could have a kind of a benefit where you have a guy like Dylan Mitchell to bring the ball up, and you're not necessarily going to see this elite ball pressure for 94 feet when he's being guarded by a guy like Isaiah Evans.
St. John's in the Sweet 16. We'll be playing Duke on Friday at 7:10 p.m. CBS for the world to see. It is Michigan State versus UConn to follow them. Good luck getting a ticket. Good luck paying for the prices. Hotels are crazy, but this is what you waited for. This is what you wanted. Roger, how big of a game is this for the St. John's world? How exciting is it to cover a game of this magnitude? I guess from your perspective as well. I mean, from the reporter lens, it's sure beats covering a 3-18 Chris Mullen year, right?
It certainly does. I would have to say that, it is very exciting to be going to cover a game like this. I felt like, when St. John's won last season against Connecticut in stores, I thought to myself, like, wow, St. John's is back. They're relevant again. And he's done this in a very, very short period of time. But if St. John's were to defeat Duke in the round of 16, make it to the Elite Eight, I think you could say that St. John's is among the elite again. And I think, any kind of a historic jump like that is a thing that you want to be a witness to history for. So, for me, that's a story that I want to tell. And it is exciting. And I think it should be exciting for all of the people who follow St. John's because it's it hasn't happened in a long time. Many of the St. John's fans are probably, 99 was before they were paying attention to college basketball.
I was
So
one.
it would be great for them to be able to have an experience of like, I remember when my team arrived. Even though they had arrived several decades ago, it would be nice for them to be able to say, this is when my team arrived.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the person you're describing, Raj. Like I was 11 years old in 99. Like I wasn't paying attention to St. John's basketball back then. I've followed those teams and caught up, but like I wasn't paying attention to it. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I was, locked into Bootsy Thornton and all the other those teams. I wasn't of age, and yeah, you catch up on it. You do your homework as a fan. But like Jay, I know you're in the same boat as me too. Kevin, you too. So like Jay, I mean you're
Right.
of the
Right.
you know,
I came in at a time where they weren't a total dumpster fire. This is, mid Lavin, that 2013-14 year. I think they were the first team left out of the tournament. And then obviously the next year they got in. So that's what those teams are what hooked me. And I saw some pretty good talent. And then the bottom fell out
yeah.
for a while until 2018 and 19. And I got my first real, another taste of postseason play. But and then Mike Anderson followed. But yeah, this it's still every day. I still it's hard to process. Like this is like the program that we're
Yeah.
following day in and day out. And of course, we all want this fairy tale story to end with them winning a national championship in Indianapolis. But I will say, if they can just give me one more at least, because I'm gonna be in DC. You guys are gonna be in DC. Give me one more at least, so I can experience a Sweet 16 victory and then get to revel in it with everyone around me. Make a weekend out of this, and who knows? The media wants it. We want it. A round four possible matchup with UConn in the Elite Eight for a trip to the Final Four. I
I
mean,
mean,
you can't write a
no,
Hollywood script this good.
no, you really, really can't. And that's what's on the line here. We have talked about what it's like for St. John's. When are they going to be able to? All season. All season, we set the kind of bar for a successful season was win 2 games in the tournament. Well, they've done that. But why stop now? That's where we're at. For for our beat writers, why stop now? You guys don't want the season to end. You guys don't want to start talking about baseball. Like no, nobody wants to do that. So why
Connelly's
not?
talking about baseball all the time anyway.
Nobody has it worse.
Nobody.
Nobody has it worse.
Not a fan of portal season, I guess. Huh, Dave?
it's always basketball around these here parts. And St. John's basketball is playing in the Sweet 16.
We are going to.
A moment on Sunday night that I will never forget, that you will never forget, a moment that is for you, Johnny Nation. That is what happened, but you're not done. And that's the mentality of this team right now. 2 down, 4 to go, and it all starts again on Friday. So get some rest. Everybody catch up on some sleep. Looking at you, Roger. I'm looking at you, Kevin. Everybody get some sleep. And I'll see you in Washington, D.C. for Duke versus St. John's in the Sweet 16. And I can't wait. And I know you can't either. So giddy up, wear red if you're coming to the game, and be loud as hell, because this is what you have been waiting for. Let's see what happens. Johnny's and Duke, number 1 versus 5, to go to the Elite 8. Not bad. He's Roger Rubin from Newsday. He's Kevin Connelly from Storm the Paint and on SI. He is Jason Dimaio. I'm David Barrow. This is Eye on the Storm podcast. This is what we've been doing all year. And now we're in the Sweet 16. If you're in DC, come on and say hi. And let's see what happens. Johnny Nation, thank you for